Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the South Coast Artists Index. And today we have a special guest. Number one, they're a returning guest. Number two, they're doing something that we've dreamt of for quite a long time. And with that in mind, and as per usual, I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves, spell their names, and tell us why they're here.
My name is Milton Brightman, Milton Brightman. I'm here because my friend Eric Hart, an artist I knew from Swain School and I worked with for like 40 years painting pictures, had passed away in October 2023, and I want to give him his due.
It's really important to do this. Jeff and I, when we first started this, I was still teaching marketing at UMass Dartmouth. And, you have to have the elevator pitch. And people say, so what's this artist index all about? And I said, well, we're pyramid builders. And they, of course, you want to catch your attention, and they have that scrunchy face look. I said, okay, pyramids weren't built to preserve the body. Pyramids were built to preserve the memories. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to preserve the memories of the contemporary living artists. And we're hoping to get the historical deceased artists. Tell us all about Eric, and how did you first meet him? And
Well, I met Eric in 1972. The first student I met at Swain School. When I walked onto the premises, he said he had to move some boxes. He'd been instructed to move some boxes of clay into the sculpture building, and he asked me if I'd help him, and I did. And so he was the first person I met, student-wise, when I went to Swain School. And as time went along, we became very good friends. We actually shared a studio together in the Melville building in our junior and senior year. And then when he left and went back to Connecticut, he asked me if I wanted to come down and visit him, so it didn't end, and I ended up visiting him for like close to 4 decades in the fall every year, sometimes in the spring, sometimes in the summer, but it ended up being mostly in the fall. And we go out painting all day, and then we'd get some beer and go back to the house and sit back and talk about the old days. So he passed away in October of 2023, and I hadn't gotten down there in a couple of years, and so I felt really bad about that. So I'm here to just make sure his memory isn't lost.
it's important. As I told you before we started this program, this episode, we wanted to make sure that we documented the legacy of every artist possible in the South Coast. And we've already had 3 prime examples of that endeavor. Dan Logan, Don Hoagland, and Kevin Josie. They all passed away. Kevin the most recently in a motorcycle accident. And I sometimes wonder if I hadn't have interviewed them. I think it's one of those things where you're statching like 25 cents a week away or whatever. It doesn't seem like a lot. And then at some point in time, 40 years later, you think to yourself, whoa, the old SBL, Savings Bank Life Insurance thing. And I wonder if it offers any comfort to their relatives and friends and acquaintances to be able to hear their voice and hear them talking about their art. So when you talked about your first day on campus at Swain, I flashed right back to my first day on campus when I was accepted at SMU, Southeastern Massachusetts University. What was it about Kevin? It was just an automatic click.
Eric.
I'm saying. Did I say Kevin? I'm sorry. I still
You're losing your train of thought.
Kevin Joseph.
What was it about him? Nothing. He was the first person I ran into, first student.
Right.
I had met the administrative people, to take your tuition and the whole 9 yards, and some of the faculty, because you had to bring in a portfolio, and that's all I had met.
Right.
So when I walked onto the premises, first day of class, they told me where to go to sculpture building. First person I ran into was Eric Hart. I didn't know him from a hole in the wall. He told me, "You want to help me move these boxes?" So I helped him move all the clay inside the building, and then we had the class, and at the end of the class, I went to talk to him, and I guess he wasn't interested in talking to me. At first, we didn't hit it off, but he hit it off with another student named Dave Peliquin, who they shared an apartment. There was a house on 6th Street where all filled with Swain students. Every apartment had Swain students in it, and they had their own apartment to share the cost of living and all that. So I used to hang around with him there, and over the first year into the second year, Dave actually had to drop out, so that just left me and Eric. And after that, we gelled together as artists, and we just stayed. We went out painting together all the time, and sometimes we left the class behind and went out painting and got in trouble for it, and we didn't care because we knew what we were up to and what we wanted to do. When he left in '76 to go back home, and he ended up getting married and settling down and everything, he wanted to know if I'd come and visit him. I said, "Why not?" So I started visiting him in probably this fall of '76, and every year, all the way through like 2018, 19, I visit him every year. And the last 20 years, he had a divorce, and he had a beautiful place on Houghton Cove and off the Thames, a little tributary off the Thames. And that's what I remember most because I loved that place so much. He had a perfect view of that cove from his windows, from his sliding doors, glass doors. And we would go down there every September and October and go down and paint for like the whole day and then into the night sometimes, and then go back to the house, have something to eat, grab some beers, and just talk about the old days, mostly about Swain, way back when, and different subjects. Right. So now I don't have that anymore.
I'm so sorry for your loss, Milt. I'm also thinking that you guys really had a traditional kind of artist friendship going, something that we would learn about in art history with the Impressionists, how, they always presented them to us as individuals, but then later on, because of the salons and exhibits and so on and so forth, we could see that some of them were lifelong friends, and they went out painting together. And that's one thing. I mean, abstract painters don't go out and paint together, but marine painters, landscape painters obviously do. Was Erica more of a marine painter, or did he go back and forth between landscape and
painted,
marine?
We call it landscape painting, which meant everything. Marine, it encompassed everything.
Everything.
We would go out, and he'd say, when I would show up, he'd say, what are you looking for today? And I'd say, how about some vistas? I want some distance, and stuff like that. Or maybe let's go down by the water today. We'd go everywhere. He knew how to drive around Connecticut, and I was just a passenger. I was like a kid in the car watching as we went around, and we'd find different areas to paint. And maybe it was 5 or 6 different locations during a day. And that's the way it went, It was a beautiful experience every fall. And that was basically based on my job because I had the state job in the state parks. From April to October was usually the tough months, but the toughest months were from April until Labor Day. After Labor Day, it lightened up, and after October, it really lightened up. So you had time to take off and go places and do things, which you wouldn't have during the summer. So that's how it all ended up that way. And it was always during the fall when the leaves were changing and the landscape was getting beautiful. And that's what we ended up doing for like 4 decades almost.
Wow. It would really be kind of wonderful. And of course you'd have to have some backing, some financial help with this, but to document this friendship of 40 years of all of your artwork into a really great book, it would be something. Because I could feel your compassion, and your passion as you speak about this friend. And I think too, also as we get older and we're lifelong friendships, they're harder to take when we have that loss. I mean, I had a friend down at the University of Miami. I went down there to do a workshop, and we hadn't seen each other for like 40 years. And the weirdest thing was, it was almost as if you and I are speaking. I leave the room, I come back 40 years later, and nothing has changed. It was almost picked up on the last conversation. It was so wonderfully weird. That was in May. He died of a fatal heart attack on New Year's Day.
I found out actually last year in October. which is about the time I'd be going down there.
Mhm.
And so it hit especially hard, because his daughter found him. He just died of a heart attack. It was over, and I just,
Let me ask you a question. How much of him rubbed off on you, and how much of you rubbed off on him?
I think a tremendous amount. I can talk from my experience that I used to study his notebooks every time I went down there. I bought his paintings. There's one right there, that's was just in a pile of watercolors. And I was looking through them. I says, hey, this is beautiful. I said, he's like working on something. He goes, what? What are you talking about? I said, this painting here. He had to let me buy it. I had it framed professionally and everything. I thought it was absolutely incredible.
Now it's a nude tree. It's nude of its leaves.
Right.
It's
That's
a winter
outside of
scene.
his.
Yeah.
That was outside of his house,
Wow.
Houghton Cove.
Right.
House.
Right.
And it must have been a misty day. It says last snow of '97, and I just said I got to have that.
Yeah, he captured the feeling of a cold winter's day, the light dusting on the tree, the snow on the ground, the water hasn't frozen yet. My brother was stationed down there in the submarine force. And did you guys ever see a submarine go by?
No, but I used to take one of the exits to go to one of his houses he lived at.
Right.
Was the submarine
Yeah.
base or whatever it was when
Right.
you get into
Yeah, Groton, New
Groton,
London. Yeah.
That was a different house, though. I forget what those bridges are called, but they're huge bridges that go across the river, the
Yeah.
Thames.
Yeah.
And then you take a right.
Uncasville, that's right. Yeah. And that's on watercolor.
Yeah, and
Wow,
gouache and some gouache.
Okay. It's very, very tight.
Yeah, he did. I bought another one of the bridge, and I gave it to Nina for Valentine's Day about
Yeah.
7 years ago. The Pascomansit Bridge. I think I sent you a picture of that. And he painted that when he came down to visit me. I says that was in the notebook. I says I got to have that. I think the following year, so I bought it off him, and I did the same thing. I had it framed professionally.
Now I don't remember. Is this particular piece in the images you sent?
I think it is.
Okay. Yeah, because we'll be able to reference it in the companion blog post to this podcast.
You can take another picture if you need.
Sure. The other thing too is as detailed as the trees are, and let me tell you have to be very, very patient doing that. And that's all fractals. That's basically what all that is. But as detailed as the tree is, which is in the middle ground, which there's really no foreground except for snow, what I find more amazing is the background at the horizon line of the river. You can actually feel the cold, the mist. It's really a beautiful, beautiful piece. What was his main goal as a painter? He was
just a straight up painter. You know what I'm saying? He didn't want to
in a traditional sense.
I'm more of a studio painter.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I find comfort in the studio with music playing, but I go out too and paint with him. But he was like a purist in that respect. He wanted to be out there painting from nature, and that's how he did his best work. He didn't go in the studio like I do and reproduce it.
So was it alla prima, like right from the first, or did he sketch out first and then
he just knocked them off?
Just knocked them off as all. So he was a virtuoso,
He was. That's why I say he used to study his work to improve my work.
Yeah.
I always said when I went to Swain School, the people I learned the most from was the students, because they had to do the work.
Yeah.
The teachers, they just talk.
Yeah.
But the students actually have to do the work. So you have to watch them and see how good they're doing it. If they're doing something that catches your attention, and you would say, wow, I got to try and emulate that. That's the way to do it. I mean, if I'm stuck on something, I could see somebody else working on it and say, and I got a lot of ideas from people at Swain. That 4 years gave me a lot of ideas just with the students, what they were doing, going around painting,
Were you ever in the military?
Yeah, I was in the Navy for.
Okay. Now, I never
years.
was. Supposedly, I was diagnosed with third-degree flat feet, which my physician at the time said there's no such thing, but shh, we won't tell anybody. So I didn't go into Vietnam. But the rest of my family has been in, and my brother was between 4 years in subs and 22 in the Coast Guard. And then, my closest military experience, other than living on the base, actually, almost like part-time in Newport, because of a fellow student's boyfriend was stationed on a destroyer, the light destroyer escort, the Dan Willis. It was very lax back then. Your beard would have been completely acceptable back then. That was Zumwalt's Navy.
That was Zumwalt, right?
Yeah,
Admiral Zumwalt.
Yeah, and so, but watching MASH was probably the closest thing, right? And I found, especially with graduate school, and then I flashed back to undergraduate school, that the kinds of friendships in art school were very similar to those friendships that in the military. There was just this camaraderie, this, we're all in this together, everybody helped each other. Of course, you always have that one, of this and one of that. But did you have that kind of experience with Eric as well, or?
Well, like I said, you had to gravitate towards certain people
Yeah.
that you thought were doing what you wanted to do.
Right.
Artistically, and so you would befriend them, and they'd befriend you,
Right.
and it was like a symbiotic relationship. You're out there working together, seeing what each other is doing, and that's how it happened. That's how it works out.
Tell me about some of the others. So that was a graduating class of 76?
76.
Okay. Tell me about some of the other students that were in that class with you and Eric.
Gary Rigo was in my.
Gary Rigo was a friend, colleague. Another one that I'd been chasing to get onto the show. I was working for an advertising agency. I saw Gary Rigo in the men's department at Sears at the mall. And Gary's personality. I don't think I ever saw that guy angry or mad. And he said, what are you up to? I said, I'm working for this advertising agency. We're looking for a graphic designer. And he says, oh, I happen to have one. It's my, I guess, soon-to-be brother-in-law. And I said, really? Yeah. So then when we hired Paul, they said, where'd you get him? I said, I got him in the men's department at Sears. But Gary was just he was a character. He certainly was a character, Who else was in the class?
Well, the only one I can tell you about right now is Peter Gay. He's back in doing artwork again.
Oh, Peter is a portraitist.
Right, and he's really become excellent at it.
Oh, really? Yeah, he
Right.
has.
So
yeah.
the other ones, it's kind of hard for me to remember because it was just a very small group of us around together. We drank together, we painted together, mostly just me and Eric.
Yeah.
Gary, too. Definitely Gary.
Yeah.
And he would take us places, maybe we shouldn't have been. We got locked in one time, but he knew the guy.
Yeah.
The guy was a farmer. He had to go up to the barn and have him unlock the gate. We're painting down on his land
Right,
somewhere
right.
in Westport there. I don't know where it was.
Yeah.
That was basically it. There were upperclassmen, too, when we were in, sophomores and juniors that we knew very well. They lived all over the place. West Island, I remember that place with
Right.
Mike Sacarici was over there. When you go back to Swain, it's hard to remember a lot of the stuff. It's 75 now. I graduated when I was 25 or 26.
Yeah.
So it's hard to remember everything back there.
Well, you talk about upperclassmen. I remember, of course, you're a freshman foundation, and you're so confused. I mean, and the way freshman foundation was conducted at SMU, and I think probably SMU and Swain are more connected than people would ever imagine, and not just with the merger. This is, the same people that were at Swain, and that's another topic for hopefully a series that we've been wanting to do for a while. But you always looked up to the upperclassmen, and you're saying to yourself, oh my God, I'll never be as good as that. And did you have guys like that you remember?
When I first got there was a freshman year. Maybe this had to be the freshman year, because that's when I was really bowled over by a lot of stuff. And there was a student there named Charlie Parker. And Charlie Parker was in the room, in the life room, working from the model, a gigantic canvas, a whole array of brushes and everything, and a giant palette. And, most people worked at a reasonable size. He was working at supersized and just going like crazy on it, And I remember that vividly because I was like, it was like a performance, and he was doing a pretty good job of it too, I mean, knocking the whole thing in. It wasn't like he was tentative. He was moving like a maniac,
Yeah.
Later on, he passed away. When he was at Swain, he had long hair, mustache, looked a little bit like Frank Zappa.
Yeah, yeah.
He showed up at a Gallery X opening and introduced himself.
Mm-hmm.
He had a suit on, a short haircut. He was bald. I'm like, he says, you don't know who I am? I says, no, I have no idea. He says, I'm Charlie Parker. He actually was a stockbroker, but he was still painting. I saw his Facebook page, and he still had gigantic paintings in his studio in New York with all these characters and everything. They were crazy looking.
Yeah.
I remember him, Mike Sacarici, Jim Buzzy, who was doing graphic work down in the basement there.
Mm-hmm.
Harriet, who ended up working for Hasbro, she was an upperclassman. And she arranged a show for me decades and decades later after seeing my work at Gallery X at the Bristol Art Museum, a one-man show. So she's one of the few people I know that actually made a living at art, and still does to this day, working for Hasbro.
What's your last name?
Harriet, I'm going to say Pomelo because that's her husband's name. She must have taken her husband's name when they got married. He was a Swain student too, Michael Pomelo.
I knew, well, she was our printmaking instructor. She came in junior year, I think it was, Roseanne Radozovic. And then I think she ended up back at Hasbro, and she's the one who did a lot of the Center Street Festival posters, which are quite the collector's items now. It's a small community. I think Don Wilkinson said that in an article years ago, something about there's only like 3 degrees of separation. He pretty much knows everybody directly, or knows their spouse, or knows somebody that went to school with them. It's that kind of a tight community in the arts. Any regrets about and we all have them when in relationships and such.
There's a lifetime of regrets, for God's sake, but some things you could have done better, other things the other person could have done better.
Right.
But I have a tendency to try and look on the bright side and not remember those things.
So you have a warm and lasting relationship with him. How did he do as an artist?
He was kind of tough. I mean, he was like Van Gogh. He reminded me of Van Gogh. He was hard to argue with. He had an opinion about something. That was the end of it. So as long as you didn't stray into too many areas to get in arguments with him, you were fine.
Really?
We used to have a really good relationship, laughing and drinking and talking, and
right.
That was most of it right there. I used to love to go down to that place on Houghton's Cove, and now it's only in my memory. I can't go there anymore because they sold the house, and it's unfortunate. Whoever lived there, they had to fix it up a little bit.
Yeah. The other thing too is the question that we all wonder about is, I don't know if there's any specific number we can put a finger on. I remember going to the Bill or Willoughby Elliott retrospective his wife Lisa put on at the Dartmouth Cultural Center earlier this year in 2024, and there was a load of work. I mean, the place was chock-a-block. It was almost salon style at the Dartmouth Cultural Center. And I know he was a successful painter. He sold work. But when you see the unsold work, what's going to happen to Eric's work?
His daughter has this full collection down there now. His daughter was the one that took care of me. He had a lot of illnesses the last few years of his life.
Right.
She brought him to the doctor, she brought him to the hospital. She has the full collection down there, and I communicate with her. Mm-hmm. And I might be going down there shortly, to see what's going on. So.
Wow. And what about you? What about your work and your legacy and your estate, so to speak?
It's going to have to be up to my relatives to take care of it when I pass,
Yeah.
I've sold what I can and do what I can do with it, but I can't. Right. Once you pass away, there's nothing more you can do.
No, you have no control, obviously.
Eric's daughter, I said, you got something right now that I don't have. A limited collection. There ain't going to be any more.
Yep. Yeah.
Everything he's done is done. Whatever you have there, that's the finish of it right there.
Yeah. We're going to be, we're writing a grant to have a series of salons and in the traditional sense with a meal and, and such. And we have a speaker who's going to be talking about, artist estates and what happens. I mean, there is a load of artwork in the marketplace, the virtual, marketplace, under beds, in attics, in basements, in studios, everywhere you can think of. And then when they pass, that stuff comes to the surface, and unfortunately, not everything goes to museums and galleries. Some of it goes into bonfires and disposal units, and that's kind of a sad thing. Do you have other pieces of his work?
I'm going to have about 10 pieces.
10 pieces? Are there more that you'd like to have? I mean, there's something...
No, I got my work too, so I can't take on too much.
Too much, yeah.
There's some of his notebooks, and I'm going to try and acquire some of those.
Yeah.
When I go down there, because that's what I used to study
The
all
notebooks
the time.
are the things that, yeah.
He was the one that got me started on my notebooks.
I didn't know you did notebooks.
I brought one, a more recent one.
One of the things, too, and we're going to be a series on murals, outdoor, urban, stuff on walls. And
Right.
one of the people I wanted to contact was you, because you and I were working in the same building. You were only a few doors down. I worked for Ray Vassalin, and I think you did as well. And there's this drop-dead gorgeous mural that Donna Gagnon, who's also been a guest on the show, as you have, And I'm just wondering, is that still there? Is it still on
Donna
the...
Gagnon. Are you talking about the school department?
Believe it may have been. Yeah, she said...
That was her boyfriend at the time.
George Garvin, but I thought she said that you had also created
I had one down in the hallway with the moonlit scene of the boat.
That's it, the moonlit scene.
Right.
Is that still there?
Last time I checked, it was.
Really?
Yeah, I'll have to check again. I drive by it all the time. I should stop and go in.
You know, I've tried to keep sketchbooks and everything like that. It just, I'm too impulsive or impatient or whatever, but these are absolutely gorgeous, my God. And there's also, too, this, and I mean this as a compliment, a medieval kind of a flair to your work. Do you understand what I mean by that? I mean, it's like with Bruegel, for example, okay? They're scenes of life. There's no predilections. There's no pretense.
Right.
They're just scenes of life. Anything that pretty much caught your eye. You know, you have these gouaches and these.
Like I said, I got that idea from Eric. I never had notebooks like that, but he had different sizes. I only stay with that one size.
There's a guy in New York that when he rides the subway, he sketches people.
I've seen that.
Yeah. Oh, this is wonderful. This is wonderful.
Yeah. I wish I had some of his to bring, but I haven't acquired them yet. But I probably will be going down there and getting a hold of one, at least one.
It would also be great too if you once you do meet with the family and speak with them, and if you get any acquisitions, I wouldn't mind doing a follow-up to this podcast. It really is important. We've got one series in the works. We have one series that's launched. We've got other things going, and the point of it is that I didn't, and now we're preparing to do a 200th where we're going to just reflect. You're going to have somebody ask us questions that we have no idea what they're going to ask us. But one of the things I do realize is that I'm one of the luckiest SOBs in town, because I've gotten to speak to like 200 plus artists about their lives, to, listen to their hopes, their fears, their triumphs, and that's a really cool thing. And every time I leave this recording studio, I walk away a little wiser, which, believe me, that's a benefit to me. But I walk away a little bit wiser and a lot more confident that I chose the right path to be a painter as well. It's a brotherhood, to use that old gender biased term.
Right.
But
I don't think in my case or Eric's case, the only two cases I can refer to here, that it was much of a choice. That's what you were born to do. That maybe it's in your DNA. I don't know how you would express it, but you were kind of born to do it, and there was no other choice. You just fell into it and just continued along, and it's the way it was. And
on that note, I find, especially now, everybody talks about screens, social media, so on and so forth, how it's affected the youth of the country. And it's always the negative, but there's also been a positive thing too, because what it's done is increased their visual acumen. And I have said this 1,000 times before, and I know you were affiliated with the trying to save the Orpheum. And I know that the struggle has been that, well, if we save the Orpheum, we're going to put the Z in trouble. And one day, just out of, I saw these young people with these incredible skills, but they just weren't cut out for school. They didn't fit in a comprehensive, and they definitely didn't want to go into the trades. But they had this natural born, I don't like the word talent, but they had this affinity for art and, visual and such. And I thought to myself, wow, the Orpheum would make a great school of visual and performing arts, where so many of these kids who end up not fulfilling, their life's, their DNA imprint. I'm trying to think of Maslow's self-actualization. That's the word. That's the highest thing, is the self-actualization, is at the end of the day, you can point to something and say, I did that.
You're talking about the Orpheum. I mean,
yeah.
I think some of the churches that they're abandoning now would be good places, because they got parking also, like St.
Right.
John's on County Street and Wing Street.
Right.
That place has been vacant for like 10 years now.
Yeah, it's a sin.
And it's a very beautiful place. I've done a painting of it, and I plan to do at least one more. And I actually sold a painting to a priest who somebody saw the painting on Facebook, or maybe they saw it at Gallery X, and they they let him know that I had it. He was a really nice guy, and he came down to buy the painting, and he's the only person that ever bought a painting off me that I actually talked down in price. I actually reduced. He wanted to give me more. I kept cutting him down because I wanted him to have it, and I didn't want to, I didn't feel like, now is the time to be mercenary. So we had to negotiate, and he ended up giving me more, but not as much as he wanted to give me.
Yeah.
So I always have a good memory of that one.
Yeah.
But places like that are just sitting there empty, and when I look at them outside, I haven't been inside, they're beautiful, They're works of art.
Well, they took right now it's under construction. They took a church, and in fact, I think some architectural firms are starting to become experts or specializing in repurposing churches, and they left the entire facade up. They removed the stained glass, but they put in leaded glass because that stained glass, the denominational thing. And that's another thing. What happens to all this stained glass?
We still got it at Gallery X.
Yeah, exactly. And the restoration, the partial restoration has been phenomenal. And I lived across the street from St. John at 327 County Street. They rehabbed the building. It was Brown's Pharmacy was on the first floor, and I think the Brown family owned it. And
there's a pizza place across the street.
Yeah,
now.
Palace Pizza, I think it is. Yeah.
But there's a building on the other side with a lot of architectural detail.
The rectory?
Not the rectory. The rectory's right next to St. John. This was on County Street. As you go down past Wing, right across from Wing Street.
Oh, all right. So the ochre colored.
Yeah,
that's 327 County. There was a rooming house. We lived on the back left of. I can still remember going up the stairs, the long hallway. We were in the back left unit. Across the hallway from us was the community bathroom. It was a shared bathroom.
Right.
That's when my mom and I moved back from New York after. So Eric's family, you've been in contact with them.
Yes.
His daughter especially, obviously. What are their thoughts and their memories? And
I tried to. I've been posting on Facebook periodically pictures of Eric's paintings, narratives that I write up myself, and I send her the information, and I will let her know about this also. And I tried to get Mike Dyer interested. I guess from the Whaler Museum.
Yeah, he's now at
relocated
Mystic now,
down to
Mystic
Connecticut.
Seaport.
Right?
Yeah, Mystic Seaport.
Right? He actually went there a few days ago.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to help her out as much as I can. The memory just doesn't fade away, and she's stuck with all these paintings and doesn't know what to do with.
Well, you just give me an idea because right now it's just a pipe dream because we're writing a grant up for it. But originally our logo was the dandelion puff, which in parts of Britain they refer to that as a clock. So I thought, well, I'd love to bring that old logo back that we originally had and have a gallery, portfolio, whatever, online, but different from what everybody thinks. It's not going to be one of those virtual things where you're going through a fake space. And we wanted to do themed, curated shows every quarter. And you just gave me the idea that, and we'd love to be able to help you and the Hart family out. We'd love to be able to curate a portfolio of, I don't even know what the right word for it is, deceased artists, historical artists, but have, especially when you're having 4 artists, have about 6 pieces of their work scanned, and then offer them, we've already spoken to an expert in that area, and have them handle all the sales, so that now you could buy these reprints, and of course, they can't, a lot of them won't have artist signatures on it, but they'll have a certificate of authenticity. What are your thoughts on that? Would you be interested in that?
Sounds good to me. Any help is welcome.
Yeah, I mean, and also too, you'd also be welcome for the curated themed shows to be among those artists. It's a way of just creating another outlet, creating more visibility, and again, mechanically, I guess to use that term, it's also a way for us to document more work and more artists. So even if we don't get the artist to sit down and do a conversation with us, at least now we've got their name, their address, that kind of thing, the basic information, and examples of their work. In fact, we've got to get back onto it. Mary Jean Blasdale, we did a podcast that we had a brand new system and we didn't know we were supposed to push a certain button. It was a great conversation, but it never recorded. And she's had some family, it's summertime, it's a big family. She's got to come back, but she was absolutely thrilled I mean, the inspiration, the New Bedford Artists, a biographical dictionary, she was an inspiration for this. And she said if she were younger, she would jump right back in and pick up. I think she left off in 1949. And she was absolutely thrilled by this. But I think it's really important because what doesn't seem important to us now, you know, when you've sat around the table at the holidays, Thanksgiving, or whatever, listening to the old folks talk, and they're going on and on about grandpa this and great-great-grandma that, and then, yeah, whatever. And then all of a sudden you get interested in your genealogy and you smack yourself in the forehead. You say, I should have paid more attention.
I know. Some of the people, my relatives, that were telling me things that I remember to this day and say, why, if they were still here, I would have dug in deeper and try to get more information. But at the time, it was like, well, I'm kind of busy. I got to get going. And now I regret that.
Yeah.
So that's what happens.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, it's too late. I mean, for years after my dad passed, I was like, oh, I'm going to call him up and ask him. You feel kind of stupid. But that's what we're doing here. And thank you for honoring your friend by, you were just doing a post. But when I saw that, I said, oh, I gotta reach out to Milton and tell him that, I want to, I mean, that form is a long form to fill out because obviously we can't go back, and there's no guarantee we can go back to you and say, well, what about this about Eric? You got to do like a complete brain dump as much as you can. Based on your experience, and that experience is happening right now, and based on your friendship with Eric that lasted over 4 decades, would you recommend any of our listeners who have friends that they have information about, they have images of their work or even tapes, if they're performing artists, would you recommend them to do what you're doing right now with us?
Sure. You mentioned Gary Rigo.
Yeah.
I know that right after he passed away, they had an event for him and everything. His daughter was involved in that, but that was like 2 years ago now.
Yeah,
so.
I reached out, but you know how crazy it gets when there's a death in the family and there's so many things you have to tie up the loose ends on. Yeah, I'd like to reach out, and you also know too that I've been trying to get Francisco Raposa, who
she's not gonna do it.
And I reached out to Frank Jr. and he's like, I'm only one person. I knew him from Dartmouth High School as my art instructor. If it wasn't for him, I would have never gotten into UMass. And I did not know he was a former Swain instructor as well. And he was probably one of the finest.
You're talking about her father.
Yeah, father. He was one of the finest watercolorists.
He was a great scrimshaw artist too.
As well. Yeah.
She told me he had a magnifying glass in his studio, and she showed me a piece that she had where he had done the lettering on it.
Yeah.
I couldn't read it with the naked eye. I had to use a magnifying glass to read it about the narrative of some whaling ship on the scrimshaw.
Yeah.
And she told me a bunch of stories about him.
Oh yeah, there were stories about him which are not for recording, and I don't mean anything bad.
I don't have anything bad.
Yeah, no, there's nothing bad about him, and he'd always dress in a suit and tie.
Oh, that was the funny part. She said that when we had to go to church on Sunday morning, I guess he liked to paint, and he's kind of like an inquisition. His wife would ask him, you're not going to church like that.
Yeah.
Tennis shoes and maybe throw a suit coat over it.
Yeah.
And he wasn't too happy that he had to leave the studio because that was his painting time, And I guess he would relent all the time, but it was.
Right. And the stories that he could tell too, because there was a lot of Portuguese American painters, artists of his generation, and just so much water under the bridge. Milt, we're going to wrap this up because this has been fantastic, but we do want you to come back. Any final thoughts about Eric? A little bit of a eulogy for him, or?
The only thing I can tell you, like I said, if you were to take Eric and me, either one of us, and cut us open, all you're going to find is straight artist all the way through. There's nothing more to be said about him. He lived his life that way, and when he passed away, there was no change whatsoever. He was the same as when I met him in '72,
Yeah.
He dedicated to doing it, and he did it all the time. And like I said, I hope to acquire some more work, and maybe we can set something up or something like that, But
Yeah. In fact, I'm really thinking about that curated show. I think that would be pretty cool. In fact, even if, because it's curated and it's themed, so you can do what the hell you want. It's our business. But, to have a show of you and Eric together, that would be great. Because, we make up the rules, we could change the rules as well. Do you consider Eric and yourself, a final question, not Final Jeopardy, but just final question. Do you consider you and Eric a throwback to another time, or are there still painters like you?
What's his name? Arthur one time talked to me up at the Whaler Museum, and I said, Arthur, I'm not from this century. And I meant it.
No, I can understand that. Yeah, I think we spoke about that when I made the reference to Bruegel and the podcast you did when we were in double digits.
All the way back to the last century. I'm not from this century.
Yeah.
And I don't think Eric was either, really.
Right.
But that's what we appreciated or not, and that's the bottom line.
Do you think, okay, so I lied, this is the last question. Do you think an art school, a certificate art school, because really, who needs a freaking diploma or all that money, unless you're going to teach, but do you think an art school similar to the old Swain Free School with a Saturday morning, because I hear so many people talk about those Saturday morning classes that are not artists and that they still have that warm spot in their heart for that. Do you think it would be possible to like you said, maybe take over one of the churches?
I don't know. It would take a will. It seems like in New Bedford we're going backwards since the Star Store closed.
Yeah.
And the elitism out in Dartmouth, that campus out there.
Right.
It seems to have taken hold.
Right. They don't even appreciate the artwork.
Right. So it seems like we're going backwards in this city when we were going forward for so long. And that was a big blow, and it's terrible that happened. It really is. I mean, I'd like to see more, like I said, taking over some of these places or using them in the same manner, like a school. But that's going to take a lot of money and a lot of willpower on somebody,
And the money is always the factor, that's for sure.
The money's always the problem.
And it would be great if we had a successful artist that could get into a position of leadership and start throwing their weight around, so to speak. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Folks, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. And if you came in late, today's guest, or this episode's guest, was Milton Brightman, who is, rightfully so, a legend in his own time. You say Milton Brightman to anybody who knows artwork around here, and they all have that same face. Like, it's like saying clam cakes for people who like clam cakes. Like, oh. And, a traditional painter who came here to eulogize and to memorialize his friend all the way back from his student days. It's the Swain School of Design, and also helped us drive home the point how important it is for us to get as much information on the lives of painters from the South Coast as possible. Painters, performers, visual performing, literary, and even culinary artists. And with that in mind, thanks so much, and remember, stay safe, be kind to yourself, and be nice to other people too. Thanks. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.